When You Wish Upon a Star, A Twisted Tale by Elizabeth Lim. Prologue. The Blue Fairy wasn't supposed to listen to wishes tonight, and especially not wishes from the sleepy little town of Pariva. But there came a twinge at her heart as she flew across the low-roofed houses and narrow cobbled roads, and her conscience begged her not to ignore it. It was well into the evening, and many of the houses were dark, their inhabitants gone to bed. Candlelight lit only a handful of windows, and the Blue Fairy saw eager faces peek out of the open frames. Adults and children alike cried into the empty streets, "Look up! The wishing star is bright tonight." And so it was. It shone so brightly that its light eclipsed the stars around it and even the moon. "Hurry, hurry!" the Blue Fairy heard a girl cry. "It'll be gone if we don't hurry up and make a wish. I've always wanted to see the wishing star. Finally, it's here." With a smile, the Blue Fairy descended upon the roof of Pariva's old bell tower, her silver slippers landing on the cracked clay tiles with the gentlest tinkle. The bell tower was empty, but even if it hadn't been, no one could see her. She was invisible, as all her kind could be when they wanted. Such allowed her to go about her business and perform the necessary duties without being seen. Now more than ever, she was grateful for that ability. Oh, she knew it was silly to feel that way. After all, there wasn't anyone in Pariva who would have recognized her, even if they could see her. And yet, that twinge in her heart sharpened. Pariva was a small village, unimportant enough that it rarely appeared on any maps of Esperia. Bordered by mountains and sea, it seemed untouched by time. The school looked the same as she remembered. So did the market and Mangia Road, a block of eating establishments that included the locally famous Bomaggio Bakery, and cypress and laurel and pine trees still surrounded the local square, where the villagers came out to gossip or play chess or even sing together. Had it really been 40 years since she had returned? It seemed like only yesterday that she'd strolled down Pariva's narrow streets, carrying a sack of pine nuts to her parents' bakery, or stopping by the docks and watching the fishing boats sail across the glittering sea. Back then, she had been a daughter, a sister, a friend, a mere slip of a young woman. Home had been a humble two-storied house on Constanza Street, with a door as yellow as daffodils and cobblestone stairs that led into a small courtyard in the back. Her father had kept a garden of herbs. He'd always frustrated by how the mint grew wild when he truly wanted to grow was basil. The herbs went into the bread that her parents sold at their bakery. Papa crafted the savory loaves, and Mama the sweet ones, along with almond cakes drizzled with lemon glaze, chocolate biscuits with hazelnut pralines, and her famous cinnamon cookies. The magic the Blue Fairy had grown up with was the sugar shimmering on her fingertips and flour dusting her hair like snow. It was her older brother, Niccolo, coaxing their finicky oven into working again, and Mama listening for the crackle of the golden brown crust before her bread sang. It was her little sister, Ilaria's tongue turning green after she ate too many pistachio cookies. Most of all, magic was the smile on Mama's, Papa's, Niccolo's, and Ilaria's faces when they brought home the bakery's leftover chocolate cake and sank their forks into a sumptuous, moist slice. After dinner, the Blue Fairy and her siblings made music together in the Blue Room. Its walls were bluer than the midsummer sky, and the windows arched like rainbows. It's been her favorite room in the house. The memories made the Blue Fairy's heart light and heavy all at once. Instinctively, her gaze fell upon her old house. It was still there, the door a faded yellow and the roof in need of repair. No one was at the window making a wish upon the star. With a deep breath, she turned away from her childhood home and concentrated on the rest of the town. Still standing on the roof of the bell tower, she leaned forward and touched the end of her wand to her ear so that she might hear the wishes being made below. "Oh, wishing star, please help my little Maria do well in school. Wishing star, I'd like for my Baki to have a whole litter of puppies, 9 of them, that look just like him, all healthy and happy, of course. I wish for my shop to have more success." So on the wishes went. Several of them caught her interest, but the Blue Fairy couldn't answer them. Pariva was not a town where she was permitted to grant wishes. Another fairy would listen to the hearts of those who spoke tonight, and would heed the pleas of those they deemed worthy. a white dove appeared at her side, settling its wings as it landed on her shoulder. It made a gentle purr, urging her to leave. "Don't worry, my friend," she replied. "I know what time it is." She'd already overstayed the hour, and she'd be missed if she lingered any longer. "Farewell, dear Periva," she muttered. She raised her hand, preparing to depart, when one last wish caught her ears. "Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight." Quickly, the blue fairy drew a circle with her wand, creating a magical window, through which she could observe the speaker more closely. He was an old man kneeling upon his bed, with a spry black kitten at its side, while he gazed wistfully up at the stars. His voice was not one she knew, but the sound of it, with its gentle inflections and earnest way, was familiar. "I wish I may, I wish I might," he continued. "Have the wish I wish tonight." His name rushed back into to her in a breath. Geppetto. 40 years had turned his hair entirely white and aged his face beyond recognition. But his kind blue eyes, and even his nose, round and slightly ruddy, were the same. Geppetto turned to his pet, a young prince of a cat with slick black fur and white paws. "Figaro, you know what I wish?" Figaro shook his head. "I wish that my little Pinocchio might be a real boy. Wouldn't that be nice? Just think." Geppetto's smile was warm and bright, but the blue fairy had always had a gift for seeing into one's heart. She could sense the loneliness lurking behind his eyes. He had no company but for his cat and the goldfish in his workshop. No wife, no son or daughter, no siblings. Periva's children delighted in the toys he made, but their laughter filled only his days. His evenings were almost entirely empty. Still smiling at the idea of having a son, Geppetto tucked himself back into bed. Within minutes he was sound asleep. The wishing star faded from the sky, and the blue fairy started to lower her wand. It was time to return home. Another fairy would see to it that Periva's wish-seekers were well taken care of, she told herself. Yet she couldn't go. Seeing Geppetto had released in the blue fairy a flood of emotions, compassion, pity, and a flicker of guilt, and she paused in her step. Her gaze fell upon the wooden puppet sitting in Geppetto's workshop. Her chest squeezed. She knew she ought to leave. She wasn't supposed to be there at all, honestly, but she couldn't bring herself to go. Her dove tilted its head inquisitively, and the blue fairy made a tentative smile. "Well, why not?" she said to the bird. "No one will know." Before she might think better of it, she waved her wand and became a soft beam of starlight, traveling swiftly into Geppetto's home. She entered through an open window and waited until Geppetto and his cat Figaro were fast asleep before she unfolded from the light. There she stood in the middle of Geppetto's workshop. She'd visited before. So long ago it felt like a dream. The walls were the same, the low ceiling and the long wooden table to the side, cluttered with tools and pots of paints and brushes and sketches too, but she would not have recognized it otherwise. Toys sat on every shelf, wooden horses with legs that wobbled and elephants with flopping ears, tiny families in boats that sang when they were wound up from the side. There were clocks too. Clocks whose hands pointed at stars, clocks whose angels standing on clouds trumpeted the hour, clocks with bunnies and sheep running out of the barn when the time struck noon and 6. Ships with red-dyed sails hung from the ceiling, and toy soldiers watched over the workshop with a high shelf just above the ceiling. So much had changed, but the smells were familiar. Pine wood and paint and gentle smoke from the hearth and snuffed wax candles. Geppetto had always loved working with wood, and the blue fairy's heart warmed to know that after all these years, that hadn't changed. "You were true to your word," she murmured, taking in the dancing couples and music boxes. "Your promise to bring joy to all those around you." A cricket hopped into one of Geppetto's shelves and settled into an open matchbox. The blue fairy smiled to herself. Even it felt welcomed in this cozy little workshop. She paused then before Pinocchio, the wooden boy Geppetto had spoken of in his wish. The puppet was leaning against the wall, newly finished and paint still drying. He was tenderly crafted, simple compared to some of the other toys in his room. But the care in every detail, from the soles of his brown shoes to the gentle lift of his eyebrows, made the blue fairy want to reach out and hug the young boy. He was Geppetto's masterpiece. There was a certain mischief in his round eyes, and his innocent smile had echoes of Geppetto's own. Had he been a real boy, he could have passed for the old toy-maker's son. A real boy. The blue fairy inhaled a deep breath. It was not within her power to grant such a wish, but her conscience would never forgive her if she left now, if she ignored the pain emanating from this noble man who had brought more than his fair share of love to the world, who could bring even more if given the chance. The first lesson she had learned as a fairy was to follow her conscience, let it guide her. "Good Geppetto," she murmured, "you have given so much happiness to others. You deserve to have your wish come true." Magic gathered in her wand, sparks glimmered from the star at its tip. She pointed it at Geppetto's feathered hat. "Little puppet made of pine," she said, "wake." A silvery crown of starlight burst from her wand, shimmering across Geppetto's body. "The gift of life is thine," said the blue fairy. The light swelled until it encompassed all of Pinocchio. Then, once it faded, Pinocchio wriggled to life, sitting up in his own. He rubbed his eyes and looked around before fluttering his hands. "I can move!" he exclaimed in astonishment. The young puppet covered his mouth with his hands, his eyes wide, blinking as if he didn't know where the sound had come from. "I can talk!" The blue fairy chuckled as Pinocchio rose unsteadily to his feet. "I can walk!" He took a few steps before he fell down onto the table once more. "Yes, Pinocchio," said the blue fairy kindly. "I've given you life." "Why?" "Because tonight Geppetto wished for a real boy." "I'm a real boy?" The blue fairy paused, not wishing to dampen his happiness with the truth, but she wouldn't lie to him. She chose her next words carefully. "No, Pinocchio. To make Geppetto's wish come true will be entirely up to you." "Up to me?" Pinocchio echoed. "Prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and someday you will be a real boy." "A real boy?" The blue fairy smiled, ignoring the wave of unease rising in her chest. She couldn't bring herself to tell the young puppet that she might not be able to grant Geppetto's wish in earnest. Turning Pinocchio into a living, breathing wooden boy in itself had been no simple feat, and it would surely come with consequences. And Pinocchio becoming a real little boy would be another matter entirely. But whatever the cost, she would bear it, and she would see his journey through. "I would find a way," she thought. "Geppetto deserves this happiness, and Pinocchio deserves to be real." She looked around, trying to figure out a way to quell the worry that still nagged her. Even with a good father such as Geppetto, a wooden boy was bound to find himself in trouble, especially one as new to life as Pinocchio. A conscience. Pinocchio would need a conscience. The blue fairy eyed the workshop and spied the humble cricket who had been eavesdropping to their conversation. She had a soft spot for crickets. Doves, too. Pinocchio would need help. Why not a cricket? This one would do fine. The blue fairy knew in her heart. After a pleasant introduction, she knighted Sir Jiminy to be Pinocchio's official conscience. Then she renewed her attention to Pinocchio. "Remember, be a good boy, and let your conscience guide you." As Pinocchio and the cricket waved farewell, the blue fairy exited Geppetto's workshop in the same soft beam of starlight with which she'd come. But she lingered outside Geppetto's house, listening to Jiminy warn Pinocchio about the world's temptations. The cricket chirped about learning right from wrong, and taught Pinocchio how to whistle when he needed Jiminy's help. She chuckled, and the unease in her heart faded. Pinocchio will be just fine. No, all she had to do was find a way to fulfill the whole wish. Surely her fellow fairies will be sympathetic to Geppetto's cause. She'd bring it up with them as soon as she could, at the next monthly meeting on the wishing star. She shot into the roof of Geppetto's workshop, resuming her fairy form to take one last look at her old friend's home. She didn't know when she'd have another chance to come back. Then she spun about to make for the wishing star that had disappeared behind the night, and a shadow fell over her. Still making promises you can't keep, mused a woman from behind. Some things never change. The blue fairy recognized the intruder immediately. Slowly she turned, and as her eyes met the scarlet fairy's, her famous poise and serenity faltered, and her lips parted with disbelief. Speechless, I see, said the scarlet fairy. She lowered her arm, letting the slender red wand in her hand click against the rough. A round ruby sparkled at its head, bright as fresh blood. Well, it has been a long time. So it has. The blue fairy tried to search the scarlet fairy's face for signs of regret or remorse, for any feeling at all. It shouldn't have surprised her that she found nothing. She raised her chin, refusing to let the scarlet fairy's appearance ruffle her. I do intend to keep my promise to Pinocchio. And make him a real boy? Pray, tell how. He is a good lad. I am certain the other fairies will see so too. They'll find that Geppetto deserves some happiness, and Pinocchio will be worthy addition to the world. They will grant me permission to give Geppetto his wish. But what if Pinocchio isn't worthy? The scarlet fairy lowered her lashes. You assume he'll be unselfish, brave, and truthful, but... But what? But he's a puppet. The scarlet fairy toyed with the strand of her dark hair, as if she were twisting the strings of a marionette. She paused meaningfully. He has no heart. Suddenly understanding what the scarlet fairy meant to do, the blue fairy's pulse quickened in alarm. Please, don't interfere, the scarlet fairy said with a laugh. But that's my duty, my responsibility. How ironic, Chiara, that after all these years, it's you who should falter from your responsibility. Then again, I shouldn't be surprised. You aren't as loyal as you make everyone think. The blue fairy flinched, both at the insult and at the sound of her birth name. Now that isn't true. Once your hopeless little fairies see what a wicked boy Pinocchio is, the scarlet fairy went on, ignoring her. You'll have to turn him back into a pile of wood. How sad old Geppetto will be then. You wouldn't! The scarlet fairy's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. Chiara had once known and loved, except it was all wrong. There was no cheer in it, no warmth, no mischief. It was cold enough to freeze the liar sea. 40 years had wedged a world between them. The blue fairy half closed her eyes, missing the days when the scarlet fairy spoke to her without vitriol, and she replied with dread. Unless what? Unless we make a wager, mused the scarlet fairy. Or are you too good and righteous to partake in a harmless little bet? Coming from you, I doubt very much that it'll be harmless. It could be very beneficial for your dear Pinocchio, the scarlet fairy said. Before Chiara could respond, she went on. And if you win, I won't tell the fairies about what we've done here tonight, and I'll help you turn Pinocchio into a real boy. Surprise made the blue fairy look up. You'd help me? If you win, confirmed the scarlet fairy. But if you lose... Chiara went silent, knowing that the price would be high. She'd been caught in a trap, and she knew it. If she left now to tell the others, the scarlet fairy would embroil poor Pinocchio into an awful plot, and everyone on the wishing star would unanimously vote that Chiara lift her spell. There would be a good chance she'd lose her wand and wings and be cast out from the fairies forever. How did we become like this? She wanted to ask aloud. Can we go back to the way things were? But she already knew what the scarlet fairy's answer would be. Hiding her disappointment, the blue fairy eyed her companion coldly. Name your terms, sister.